There are people that just covet these cars. There's a whole club. It's unbelievable. I was a little old. I was in my 30s when Knight Rider started, so I would see it occasionally. But
Somewhere in America right now, there is a barn. Inside that barn, under 30 years of dust, hay, and forgotten junk, there might be a car worth $500,000. A car that millions of people watched on television every single week. A car that studios sold for pocket change because they had no idea what they were throwing away. This is not a story about cars. This is a story about what happens when cultural history gets abandoned, and the obsessed, relentless, occasionally insane people who refuse to let it stay lost. 15 cars, 15 disappearances, some of the most incredible recovery stories you will ever hear, and a question you need to answer before this video ends, because one of these cars might still be out there, and it might be closer to you than you think. Stay with me. This list gets wilder the further down we go. Number 15, the Dwayne's World Dream Van, 1976 Dodge Sportsman. Before we get to the heavy hitters, let's start here, because this story sets the tone for everything that follows. Custom vans were a cultural phenomenon in the 1970s, and television producers knew it. When a modified 1976 Dodge Sportsman appeared in variety show segments and regional television broadcasts throughout the late 70s, nobody thought to document it properly. It was a prop, a set piece, something to park in the background and make a sketch look cool. When the production wrapped, the van went to a studio lot auction and sold for $275 to a man from Reseda who thought it would make a good camping vehicle. He used it twice, parked it behind his house, and moved to Phoenix in 1982, leaving the van exactly where it sat. It stayed there for 19 years. A neighbor's kid who had grown up watching those television segments recognized the distinctive side mural in 2001 and called a memorabilia dealer. The dealer paid $800 for it. The van sold at auction in 2019 for $34,000. That is the entry-level version of this story. The cars that follow, the numbers get much, much bigger. Number 14, the Bandit's Trans Am, 1977 Pontiac Firebird Trans Am. Before Knight Rider made the Trans Am a television icon, Smokey and the Bandit made it a cultural religion. And while the film cars are more famous, the Trans Am's television appearances in promotional segments, talk show visits, and made-for-TV specials created a separate trail of vehicles that scattered across the country like seeds in the wind. Several Trans Ams used specifically for televised promotional content in 1977 and 1978 were never properly catalogued. When the circuit ended, they moved through dealer hands, private sales, and eventually, inevitably, into garages and storage units across the Southeast. One surfaced in 2004 at an estate sale outside Baton Rouge, still wearing the original gold and black paint, under a coat of primer someone had sprayed over it in 1989. Authentication took 8 months, matching production photographs against unique body panel modifications made specifically for camera positioning during promotional filming. The restored Trans Am sold in 2017 for $210,000. The man who bought it at that estate sale had paid $1,400. Let that number sit with you for a second. Number 13, the Fall Guy Truck. 1982, GMC Sierra Grande. The Fall Guy ran for 5 seasons on ABC between 1981 and 1986, and Lee Majors' big black pickup was as central to the show's identity as the man himself. GMC supplied multiple trucks across the production run, and the stunt team put them through punishment that would make a modern insurance adjuster physically ill. When the show ended, most trucks dispersed through studio sales. The primary hero truck, used for close-up filming and most promotional photography, dropped out of documented history in 1987 and stayed gone for 18 years. A Colorado mechanic spotted it at a rural equipment auction in 2005. It had been repainted white, fitted with a snowplow mount, and used as a ranch work truck for 15 years. The owner had no idea what was under the white paint. Neither did the mechanic initially. But something about the chassis modifications nagged at him, and he spent 3 months cross-referencing production photos before confirming what he suspected. Authentication came through custom frame reinforcements and a non-factory roll cage that matched stunt specifications exactly. Restoration cost $67,000 and took 3 years. The finished truck now appears at stunt industry events and action television conventions, and Lee Majors himself has seen photographs of it, reportedly commenting that it looked exactly right. Number 12. The Hardcastle and McCormick Coyote X 1981 Fiberfab Avenger. If you were watching television in 1983, you knew the Coyote X. A low-slung, futuristic sports car built on a Volkswagen chassis by specialist coach builders with a fiberglass body that looked like nothing else on the road. A BC used 3 Coyotes across the show's 3-season run, and when the series ended in 1986, the cars were sold separately, with minimal documentation. Their fiberglass construction made them vulnerable to amateur restoration attempts, and difficult to authenticate because the original body molds had been destroyed. Anyone with the right skills could build a convincing replica. The search for authenticated Coyotes became one of the obsessive subcommunities of TV car collecting through the 1990s. A historian finally confirmed the primary hero car's location in 2003, sitting in a Tucson garage, badly damaged from a rear-end collision in the early 1990s. Fiberglass cracked across the rear quarter, and the interior stripped to bare metal. The restoration was genuinely brutal. With no original molds available, bodywork required hand-forming every panel back to screen-accurate dimensions, using only production photographs as reference. Total cost exceeded $110,000. The finished car lives in a private California collection, occasionally appearing at conventions where grown men who were 12 years old in 1984 completely lose their composure. Number 11. The Airwolf Helicopter, Bell 222. Technically not a car, absolutely making this list anyway. Airwolf aired on CBS from 1984 to 1987, and the modified Bell 222 was one of the most visually distinctive aircraft in television history. When CBS canceled the show, the helicopter was sold to a production company and eventually reached an operator in Germany, where it was destroyed in a crash in 1992, killing 3 people. But here's what most people don't know. A second Bell 222 used during production survived. It passed through multiple U.S. owners with its television history completely undocumented before a dedicated Airwolf researcher tracked it to a storage facility in Nevada in 2008. Still wearing a paint scheme sprayed over the show's distinctive black and gray livery, the helicopter had been sitting non-airworthy for 11 years. Restoration to flying condition and screen-accurate appearance took 6 years and cost the owner over $400,000. It is now one of the most recognizable aircraft on the airshow circuit. Some things are too important to stay lost. Number 10. The Rockford Files Pontiac Firebird, 1974 to 1978, Pontiac Firebird. Now, we get into the cars you know. Universal Television burned through dozens of Pontiac Firebirds across the 5-season run of the Rockford Files. Most of them destroyed pulling the show's signature Rockford turn, that tire-screaming, reverse 180-degree maneuver that made James Garner look cooler than any television detective had a right to look. Think about what that means. They were buying genuinely beautiful sports cars and deliberately destroying them for a camera shot. Over and over again. Season after season. When the series wrapped in 1980, surviving cars scattered into studio auctions and private hands with almost no paperwork. For nearly 2 decades, the hero cars were simply gone. Not in collections, not in museums, just gone. One of the primary tan Firebirds used for close-up driving scenes resurfaced in 1998 when a Southern California collector spotted it at an estate sale. Still wearing faded gold paint, missing the front spoiler, and riding on mismatched tires from years in a Burbank garage. To an untrained eye, it looked like any other tired late 70s Firebird that had lived a hard life. Authentication came through matching the VIN to Universal's production insurance records, and identifying unique chassis reinforcements made specifically for stunt driving, including a welded subframe brace that never appeared on any factory Firebird. This car had been built to survive punishment no showroom vehicle was designed to take. The collector spent $38,000 restoring it to 1977 Season 4 condition and brought it to a car show in Pasadena, where a retired Universal grip walked up, looked at the driver's door, and recognized a specific scratch from a scene he had personally filmed nearly 20 years earlier. James Garner himself reportedly saw photographs of the restored car and confirmed interior details that only someone who had actually driven it would know. That is what authentication looks like when it really works. Number 9. The Miami Vice Ferrari Daytona Replica. MG-based Spider replica. Here is something that will rearrange the way you think about everything you watched on television in the 1980s. When Miami Vice debuted in 1984, that sleek black Ferrari Daytona Spider was as much a part of the show's identity as the pastel suits and Phil Collins on the soundtrack. Viewers watched Don Johnson cruise Miami in what looked like $1 million Italian exotic. It was a replica, built on a modified MG chassis by specialist coach builders, because Ferrari looked at the NBC production budget and flatly refused to participate. NBC had several built for the show's first 2 seasons. When Ferrari eventually relented and allowed real Testarossas in 1986, the Daytona replicas were quietly sold off with almost no documentation. The primary hero replica, the one Don Johnson drove in the pilot, disappeared completely for 21 years, until a Miami car dealer found it in a storage unit outside Fort Lauderdale in 2007. Still painted gloss black, missing the interior trim, sitting on cracked concrete 6 miles from where it had originally filmed. Here is where it gets complicated. Multiple replica builders had flooded the collector market with fakes nearly impossible to distinguish from originals. The car's television history was working against it because everyone claimed theirs was real. The breakthrough came when a prop archivist found production photographs showing a specific dashboard crack and a non-standard antenna mount on the left rear quarter panel that matched this exact car. A Miami Vice superfan bought it for $41,000, a fraction of what an actual Daytona Spider would cost, and restored it to pilot episode specification, right down to the wire wheel covers that made it look like $1 million exotic on a television budget. The irony that the replica is now a museum piece while real Daytonas sit in climate-controlled garages as investments is not lost on anyone who thinks about it for more than 30 seconds. Number 8. Black Beauty. 1966. Chrysler Imperial. Van Williams and Bruce Lee might have been the heroes, but every kid watching the Green Hornet in 1966 knew Black Beauty was the real star. A jet black 1966 Chrysler Imperial, loaded with gadgets that made Batman's car look underpowered. Rockets, lasers, a scanner system that looked genuinely futuristic in 1966. Built out by legendary customizer Dean Jeffries, who approached the commission like an engineering project. ABC used 3 Imperials for the show's single season. When the series was canceled, one of the great network mistakes of the 1960s, the cars went separate ways. The primary hero vehicle dropped off the radar entirely, for 31 years. A classic car hunter found it in a Phoenix warehouse in 1997, painted flat black over the original paint, stripped of every custom component down to bare steel. Whatever gadgets Jeffries had installed were gone. Whoever owned this car had removed everything valuable and left the shell. Restoration took 9 years and cost over $200,000, mostly because recreating the gadget systems required tracking down original production blueprints through Jeffries' personal archives and interviewing surviving crew members who remembered where specific switches had been mounted. this wasn't restoration. It was forensic reconstruction. When Black Beauty appeared at a California car show in 2006, Bruce Lee fans who had been searching for it for decades lined up 4 hours before the doors opened just to stand next to the car their hero had ridden in every week. Some cars have physical presence that photography simply cannot capture. Number 7. The Munster Coach. 1965, custom built. George Barris built the Munster Coach from 3 Ford Model T bodies welded together into something that had absolutely no right to look as incredible as it did. CBS used it throughout the Munster's 2-season run as the family's everyday transportation, which told you everything you needed to know about the Munster family. When the show ended in 1966, Barris retained ownership for promotional appearances, but one of the 2 screen-used versions disappeared sometime in the early 1970s and stayed gone for over 2 decades. A memorabilia dealer tracked it to a storage facility in Venice, California in 1995, sitting under a canvas tarp since 1973, still wearing the original black paint. Engine seized, custom upholstery rotted from the California heat. Authenticating a Barris build is straightforward in one respect. Barris documented his work meticulously. The man understood history was being made. Chassis numbers matched his original build records immediately, without ambiguity. Restoration cost $175,000 and took 5 years, partly because recreating the coffin-shaped interior and Victorian-style body detailing required craftsmen who still understood the metalwork techniques Barris had used in the mid-1960s. A dying craft applied to a singular vehicle. When the restored coach appeared at a Munster's fan convention in 2001, grown adults who had watched the show as 7-year-olds in 1965 stood in line for 3 hours. More than a few of them cried. Because some cars aren't just cars. They're the whole memory of being a kid on a Friday night, when the world was smaller and stranger and more magical than it would ever be again. Number 6. The Monkey Mobile. 1966. Custom Pontiac GTO. Stop for a second. Before we get to number 5, I need you to think about something. Every single car on this list was sold, lost, and abandoned by people who had no idea what they were throwing away. Studios that needed storage space, production companies that needed cash, private buyers who just wanted an interesting vehicle and never thought to mention where it came from. How many more are still out there right now? Drop a comment. Tell me, which TV car do you think is sitting in a barn somewhere, waiting to be found? I read every single one. Now, the Monkey Mobile. Barris Customs built 2 for the NBC series in 1966, stretching a Pontiac GTO into a wild open-topped show car with a rear-mounted parachute, a custom rear engine cover, and a profile so outrageous it made every other car on television look boring. Both cars toured constantly after the show ended in 1968. Shopping malls, state fairs, the full promotional circuit, before the circuit wound down and the cars went their separate ways. The second Monkey Mobile, the one used primarily for filming, vanished from the continental United States entirely. For nearly 30 years, nobody in the collector community could find it, until a Monkeys historian received a tip in 1999 that a matching car had been sitting in a garage in Puerto Rico for over a decade. Getting the car back to the mainland cost nearly as much as the purchase price. Authentication required flying production experts to Puerto Rico to verify chassis numbers before anyone committed to the deal. A collector bought it, shipped it to California, and spent $92,000 returning it to 1966 show condition, including recreating the working parachute system and sourcing the correct Pontiac rally wheels from the show's opening credits. On paper, a stretched GTO with a parachute sounds absolutely ridiculous. Standing next to it in person, you understand immediately why 10-year-olds in 1966 thought it was the greatest thing they had ever seen. Number 5. The Starsky and Hutch Gran Torino. 1975. Ford Gran Torino. Ford supplied 35 Gran Torinos to the Starsky and Hutch production over 4 seasons. The stunt team destroyed them so fast that the production became one of the largest single consumers of Gran Torinos in the country. 35 cars, 4 seasons, a stunt team with absolutely no mercy. The bright red paint with the white vector stripe was Aaron Spelling's idea, and it turned a perfectly ordinary mid-size Ford into one of the most recognizable cars in American television history within 15 minutes of the pilot airing in 1975. By the end of that first season, Ford was getting calls from dealerships across the country from customers who wanted the car from the show. Most survivors sold at studio auctions in 1979. A handful went straight into private collections, but 3 hero cars used for close-up filming simply dropped out of sight until a California collector began systematically tracking down every Gran Torino with a production VIN in the early 1990s. This is the kind of obsession that takes over people's lives, cross-referencing VIN databases, calling junkyards, placing classified ads in regional newspapers, years on a puzzle with hundreds of pieces and no picture on the box. 2 of those missing hero cars eventually surfaced. One in a Sacramento body shop where it had been painted brown, and converted into a daily driver. Another in a Portland storage unit where a widow had been paying rental fees for 11 years without knowing what her late husband had actually bought at that 1979 studio sale. The Sacramento car cost $29,000 to restore, requiring a complete repaint back to the exact PPG red used on the show and matching the specific stripe width from Season 2 filming. Both cars now appear at law enforcement appreciation events and 70s television festivals, where retired cops who used to claim they watched Starsky and Hutch for research purposes finally get to admit the truth. They just wanted to be Paul Michael Glazer sliding across that hood. Number 4. The Magnum PI Ferrari 308 GTS, 1979 to 1980. Ferrari 308 GTS. Ferrari didn't do replicas for Magnum PI. Tom Selleck's relationship with that car was so central to the show's identity that CBS negotiated directly with Ferrari, which meant the production was handling some of the most valuable sports cars in America on a daily filming schedule. Think about the insurance on that production. Think about what it meant to hand a genuine Ferrari 308 GTS to a stunt driver and say, "Make it look exciting." Several later season stunt cars went missing after the show ended in 1988, sold through Ferrari's own dealer network with no disclosure of their television history. They re-entered the used exotic car market and disappeared into garages across the country, indistinguishable from any other 308 GTS, except for modifications that would only mean something to someone who knew exactly what to look for. A Magnum PI fanatic in Florida spent 8 years cross-referencing Ferrari chassis records with CBS production logs before locating 2 stunt cars in 2001. One in a Naples, Florida garage. One at a Scottsdale classic car dealer who had no idea what he was selling. Authentication on a Ferrari is actually easier than most TV cars. The factory records are extraordinarily detailed. Once chassis numbers match the production logs, the stunt-specific modifications confirm everything. Reinforced rocker panels, camera mount brackets welded to the undercarriage. Things Ferrari certainly did not install at the factory. One recovered car still had its original red paint under 2 subsequent respray jobs. When the restorer stripped it back, the specific shade of Rosso Corsa matched Ferrari's original delivery invoice to the CBS production company. Exactly. These cars now appear at Ferrari Club events in Florida, where middle-aged men who had Tom Selleck posters on their walls in 1983 stand next to the actual car and quietly realize their taste in automotive icons was absolutely correct all along. Number 3. The A-Team Van. 1983, GMC Vandura. Universal Television built 5 identical GMC Vanduras for the A-Team's 5-season run. Same black paint, same red stripe, same red spoiler and roof-mounted turbine. interchangeable during filming. That interchangeability was essential for production, and it became a nightmare for authentication 30 years later, when every modified black van in America was claiming to be the real one. After the show ended in 1987, 4 of the 5 vans disappeared into private hands almost immediately. The paper trail on each was thin enough that collectors spent years arguing about which survivors were genuine and which were replicas built by enthusiasts who knew exactly what they were doing. The primary hero van, the one in the opening credits every single week, the one a generation of kids watched before they were old enough to understand why 4 guys on the run were building tanks out of farm equipment, was tracked to a San Fernando Valley storage facility in 2006 by a fan who had spent 4 years cross-referencing production photos against VIN records from Universal's archives. What confirmed it beyond any doubt? A unique rear suspension modification the stunt coordinator had requested to handle camera equipment weight during chase sequences. Plus, a custom internal roll cage configuration matching a technical drawing found in a retired stunt driver's personal files. A collector paid $85,000 for the van and spent another $78,000 returning it to exact 1983 screen condition, down to the correct GMC turbine rally wheels and the specific CB radio setup visible through the windshield in exterior shots. The van now tours military appreciation events and veteran gatherings every summer. And there is something genuinely moving about watching Vietnam-era veterans, the generation the A-Team was quietly written for, put their hands on the side of that van and just stand there for a minute, remembering what it felt like to watch 4 guys the system had failed figure it out anyway. Number 2, KITT 1982 Pontiac Trans Am. Universal Television built 19 Pontiac Trans Ams for Knight Rider's 4-season run between 1982 and 1986. Each one customized with the signature nose scanner, dashboard electronics, and voice modulation system that made KITT feel genuinely alive to every kid watching on Friday nights. 19 cars. When the series ended, most were sold through studio auctions or stripped for custom components and quietly scrapped. Within a few years, the whereabouts of the primary hero cars had become one of the great mysteries in TV memorabilia collecting. The most documented loss was the Season 1 hero car, the Trans Am that performed the famous turbo boost jump in the pilot, which vanished completely after a 1987 studio equipment sale and stayed missing for over 20 years. 20 years! A Knight Rider historian tracked it to an Arizona salvage yard in 2008. The owner had been pulling parts off it for years without any idea what he had, because someone had removed the production markings and VIN tag after the sale, leaving it looking like any other black Trans Am that had lived a hard life. Just a dead car in a yard full of dead cars. Authentication came through frame reinforcements that only appeared on the turbo boost stunt cars, plus a unique hydraulic system on the firewall that matched production engineering drawings exactly. The car that launched a generation's belief in artificial intelligence, that made kids talk to their cars on the drive home and actually expect an answer, had been sitting in a salvage yard, being slowly disassembled. A collector rescued it, spent $95,000 on a full restoration, including a working LED nose scanner and a custom voice system that actually responds to commands. The finished car now appears at 80s nostalgia events where Gen X fans wait in 2-hour lines to sit behind that dashboard and feel 14 years old again. To be back in a time when the future seemed like it was going to be incredible, when a car that could talk felt like proof that anything was possible. The real tragedy is how many KITTs Universal destroyed, because every single one that survived feels like a miracle that almost didn't happen. Number 1. The General Lee, 1969 Dodge Charger. Now, Warner Brothers burned through more than 300 1969 Dodge Chargers during the 7-season run of the Dukes of Hazzard. 300 cars. Let that settle into your understanding of what that production actually was. A clean 1969 Charger is worth $150,000 today. The production was buying them for $3,500 apiece and launching them off dirt ramps into creek beds. The stunt team destroyed cars so fast that Warner Brothers had scouts traveling the entire Southeast, buying up every surviving Charger they could find. The General Lee didn't save classic Mopars. It consumed them. By 1983, the production had burned through so many 1969 Chargers that the muscle car supply in the American South was genuinely depleted. Collectors who came looking for original Chargers in the late 1980s kept finding the same story. Somebody from a television production had already been there and bought it. When the show ended in 1985, somewhere between 17 and 25, Chargers were believed to still exist from the original fleet. The search for authenticated survivors became one of the longest-running treasure hunts in American car culture, and it is still running today. Confirmed General Lees have turned up in barns in Georgia, junkyards in Tennessee, private collections in Texas, and storage units in California over the past 4 decades, each one requiring painstaking authentication against production records, paint samples, and the specific roll cage configurations Warner Brothers welded into every car before sending it over a jump. The most famous barn find came in 2007 when a Dukes fan in rural Georgia found a complete Charger under 22 years of hay and farm equipment, still wearing original Hemi orange under layers of grime, the number 01 faintly visible through the dirt on the door. 22 years, in a barn, in Georgia, underneath hay. Restoration cost $145,000 and took 4 years. When the finished car appeared at a Dukes festival in Nashville, the crowd reaction was something between a rock concert and a church revival. Because the General Lee is not just a TV car. For a generation of Americans who grew up in the rural South watching Bo and Luke Duke outrun every crooked county sheriff on television, that orange Charger with the Confederate flag roof represented something they felt in their chest before they were old enough to explain why. It represented a world where the little guy wins, where horsepower and loyalty beat money and corruption, where you could jump a car over a creek and land clean on the other side, ready for whatever came next. That feeling is what people are really paying for when they pay $145,000 to restore a car. They are buying back a version of themselves that still believed in that. 15 cars on this list, and we have barely scratched the surface. Because here is the truth about famous TV cars. The studios kept almost no records. They treated these vehicles as disposable equipment, not historical artifacts. Which means the number's still out there, in barns, in storage units, in garages where the owner has no idea what they're sitting on, is genuinely unknown. Somewhere right now, there is a 1969 Dodge Charger nobody has found yet. There is a black Trans Am with modifications that don't appear on any factory build sheet. There is a van, or a Firebird, or something so strange and specific that only one person in 1,000 would recognize it, and that person hasn't found it yet. Maybe you have seen something. An old car in a neighbor's garage, a vehicle at an estate sale that looked a little different than it should, a barn on a rural property you drive past on the way to somewhere else. Before you go, hit that like button if these stories hit you the way they hit me. Subscribe and turn on notifications because the next part of this series goes even deeper into the cars that haven't been found yet and the people still looking for them. And drop a comment right now. Which TV car do you think is still out there waiting to be discovered? These cars are living history. Every single one that survived is a miracle. And the next miracle might be waiting for you to find it. Watch the next video on your screen. I will see you there.